This is the Mongoose Argus ST Trail Fat Tire mountain bike, and what struck me right away is how calmly it rolls over surfaces that usually make me tense up. Loose gravel, roots, wet sand, it all feels less dramatic and more controlled, which makes longer rides a lot more enjoyable. I would put this in the fat tire trail category. It is for riders who want to explore more than just one type of path, people who ride mixed terrain or live where conditions change often, and anyone who values confidence and comfort over sheer top speed. I'm a taller rider at 6 feet 2 inches, and I lean toward bikes that do not fight me when I point them down a rocky trail or across soft ground. This one fits that role very well. The look is clean and utilitarian in a good way. The frame is aluminum, and that matters in daily use because it is manageable to lift, and it will not rust if you store it in a damp garage or ride in rain and near the ocean. The fat tires are the star of the show here. They are wide, around 4 inches, which changes the way you feel the trail. At the handlebar, you get a stable stance that keeps your shoulders relaxed. The saddle surprised me. I usually swap saddles immediately, but I stayed with the stock one and did not think about it on longer rides, which is a win. The brakes are mechanical disc brakes, and that means consistent stopping in wet and dry conditions without fussing over fluid or bleeding. The drivetrain gives you 16 usable gears, and that is enough range to climb without grinding and still carry speed on flat sections. Setup was straightforward. I set the bike up in under 1 hour with the included tools and instructions. I had to true the front rotor a touch and snug one cable after a short shakedown ride, which is typical for a new bike settling in. Sizing was spot on for me with the 19-inch frame. The standover felt comfortable, and I did not have to slam the seat post to find my height. The first pedal strokes felt predictable, not twitchy, which is what I want from a fat tire bike. The steering is steady. It is not slow, but it does not flick like a cross-country race bike. Shifting felt smooth and light, and I was not hunting for gears. The chain moved across the cassette quietly, even under load on a short punchy climb near my house. Performance is where this bike earns its keep. The rigid fork might sound harsh on paper, but in practice, the big tires are doing a lot of the suspension work. Drop the pressure to around 8 to 10 pounds per square inch for loose terrain, and you get a soft, grippy feel without excessive bounce. On hard pack or pavement, bump the pressure closer to 12 to 15 pounds per square inch, and it rolls better while keeping a bit of cushion. Braking power is solid for the speeds this bike invites. The levers have a progressive feel, so you can feather speed into corners without locking up. On a couple of wet mornings, I did get a light squeal from the front rotor until the pads dried, which is normal for mechanical discs in rainfall and not a deal breaker. The frame feels stiff laterally, so when you stand and crank up a hill, the energy goes forward rather than into flex. Out on the trail, I tried a little bit of everything. On a loop with roots, small rock ledges, and patches of loose pea gravel, the tires smoothed out the chatter. I could stay seated over sections where I would usually hover slightly above the saddle. That meant less fatigue in my lower back and shoulders by the end of the ride. On a sandy beach access path, I expected to dig in and stall, but the bike kept momentum as long as I stayed light on the bars and let the front wheel find its line. It is not fast on deep sand, but it is very manageable. On a short paved commute to a coffee shop, I kept the tire pressure higher, and while you do feel more rolling resistance than a narrow tire, it is not a slog. If your ride includes both pavement and dirt, the trade-off is worth it for the control you get when the surface turns sketchy. A specific use case that sold me on this bike was a weekend ride to a nearby coastline. I rolled from my neighborhood on pavement, cut through a gravel service road, and dropped onto a stretch of damp beach at low tide. I lowered the tire pressure a bit before the sand, pedaled along the firmer sections, and then climbed the access trail back to the main road. I never had to fight the front wheel or unclip to push. The tire footprint let me ride sections that I would usually avoid with a standard trail bike. On the way home, I pumped the tires back up with a mini pump and finished the ride without that sluggish feel that sand rides sometimes leave you with. It felt like one continuous route instead of 3 separate rides. There are small things that make daily use easier. The simplicity of a rigid fork means fewer parts to service. The aluminum frame shrugs off a little salt spray or a rainy week with no hint of corrosion. The brake feel is consistent in cold weather because there is no fluid to get fussy. The gear range is wide enough that I can spin comfortably on flat sections and still drop to a climbing gear that does not punish my knees. The geometry keeps me upright enough that I can look around and pick lines without feeling like I am hanging over the front axle. When I stand to sprint, the bike responds quickly, and when I sit and grind up a fire road, it tracks straight without wandering. It is not perfect, and that is important to say. On smoother pavement, the wide tires hum and you can hear them, which will not bother most people but is noticeable if you are coming from a skinny tire bike. The stock pedals are serviceable but a little slippery in wet shoes, so I swapped them for a grippier pair after the first few rides. The mechanical discs needed a short cable adjustment after my second ride as the pads bedded in. The rigid fork can transmit sharper hits to your hands if you run too much pressure, so it pays to experiment with your tire pressure until the front end feels planted but not bouncy. None of these are deal breakers. They are just the real-world details you learn after a few days with the bike. I also want to mention size and fit, because that makes or breaks a bike for me. I am 6 feet 2 inches with long legs, and the 19-inch frame felt right out of the box. I could get full extension without sliding the saddle to the rails. The handlebar width felt supportive on rough sections, but not too wide for tight trees. If you are much shorter or much taller, there are other frame sizes, and I would suggest thinking about reach and standover rather than just height numbers. Riding character is the reason I kept reaching for this bike over others. It is calm when the trail turns messy. It is stable when my attention wanders a second to look at the view. It boosts confidence on rainy days when the ground is slick. It encourages exploration. I found myself taking side paths that I would usually pass by because I was not worried about getting bogged down in sand or loose rock. That mindset shift adds up over a season. I rode more and I worried less. A thoughtful touch that I appreciated is how well the frame cleans up. I chose a darker color because it hides dust and mud after a ride. A quick rinse and a wipe with a rag, and it looks ready to go again. The cables run neatly and do not rattle. The chain line stays quiet if you keep it lubed. The whole package feels like it was built to be used hard without demanding delicate care. If you want blistering speed on smooth pavement, this is not your best match. If you are chasing the lightest possible build, you will find lighter options. If your trails are all big jumps and rough downhill tracks, a full suspension setup might be better. If your rides are a mix of paved path, gravel, pine needles, and the occasional stretch of sand or snow, and you value traction, comfort, and simplicity, this bike makes a lot of sense. It is the kind of machine that keeps you riding when conditions are not ideal, and that matters more than any single specification. That is my real experience with the Mongoose Argus ST Trail Fat Tire Mountain Bike. If you want more videos like this, please subscribe to the channel and tell me how you would set this bike up or what you want to know in the comments. Thank you for watching.